Hi, everyone. I think we're going to start now. Bruce, you got to take a seat, sweetie. Hi, I'm Sue Hostetler. I'm the vice chair of the board here at the Anderson Ranch. It is my complete pleasure to welcome you today for this rare opportunity to hear from the brilliant and iconic artist, Carrie Mae Weems. Tonight, we celebrate at the recognition dinner our 50th anniversary, and Carrie Mae will receive the 2016 Anderson Ranch National Artist Award. We are extremely grateful to her for spending time here at the ranch and for giving our supporters in the community an opportunity to get to know her. I would also like to express great thanks to Toby Lewis, our presenting sponsor, and to others who are making the event possible, including our National Council, our corporate and media partners, and of course all of you that are here today to support this very magical place. At about the same time that the Anderson Ranch was being founded, Carrie Mae Weems was first becoming interested in the arts. She began as a teenager taking part in street theater and dance. Then a few years later, a boyfriend gave her a Nikon camera and she found her true love. The camera, not the boyfriend. For me personally, the Indelible Kitchen Table series was transformative. Released in 1990, it was the same year I started graduate school at the Art Institute. The work really seemed to represent the moment when Carrie Mae found her artistic voice, and I will tell you, as a photography student at the Art Institute, we were all obsessed with the work. Fast forward a few decades. Today, the Anderson Ranch is turning 50, and Carrie Mae is a world-renowned artist at the pinnacle of her career. In 2014, she was the first African-American woman to have a major retrospective at the Guggenheim. She is an artist that the critic Roberta Smith has described as working in the gap between art and politics. It is a space which she helps us engage some of the most challenging social issues of our time, and obviously very important at this moment. The past few years have brought Carrie Mae many awards and honors from organizations as diverse as the U.S. State Department, the Congressional Black Caucus, the International Center of Photography, and the honor that made her mother most excited, the BET Awards. She holds a MacArthur Genius Grant and honorary degrees from several distinguished institutions. And here is a lesson for us all. Carrie Mae attributes much of her success as an artist not to scholarship, but to curiosity. She says it was curiosity that led her to the arts, and then to many, many places she might otherwise have never gone. It is my complete honor to welcome Carrie Mae Weems.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm so nervous. I thought, what am I going to wear? I changed my clothes like 5 times, and then I put on a pair of jeans. I just couldn't take it. Thank you. This extraordinary honor. It's always a deep, 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 deep honor to have the work recognized, to be here at the Anderson Ranch, to stand before you all, these sort of incredible people who have decided that this is home, that this is special, and that making a place for artists to work, for artists to think, for artists to be themselves, to explore. What an incredible board. What an amazing group. From Nancy to Ashley, thank you. Sue, thank you for this wonderful introduction. Toby, thank you. To Bruce and BB for the amazing dinner last night, that incredible piece of meat. My hips are expanding, thank you. To the Greenbergs, Jan and Ron, thank you. And of course to the amazing Bunny and Charles Burtson for whom I would not be here without their generosity of spirit and their willingness to take a chance on somebody like me. When I thought that, well, Carrie, the only thing that you can actually do is just sort of be yourself. And then I thought, what a scary thought. So what I thought we would do, I'm going to take you a little bit through some of the work that I've been making over the last few years. I'm going to show you some slides, and I'm going to show you also a little bit of a video, and talk to you about some of the projects that are really important to me, whether they're my projects or projects that are being made by other artists. Yeah? So let's dim the lights, please, and we're going to start. Please don't start with the video, actually. I'm going to actually read something, and Sean, and then we're going to actually just go to the next slide. Just go to the next slide. We won't worry actually about showing the first video because it's just a little long. I know that we are in a very deep and a very complicated time. The last few months, the last few years have been absolutely tumultuous, painful, riveting, fascinating, exciting, troubling. And so I thought I needed to take a moment, and I needed to sort of step back, and that I wanted to start my presentation just with a sense I want you to know of where I kind of am and what I'm sort of thinking about and how I'm positioning myself in relationship to this moment, this historical moment in which we live, and my talk today. A woman stands in the thaw of winter, the beginning of spring, considering, reflecting, imagining, contemplating the past, and imagining the future. With one step, she could be in the future in an instant, or in the past, or in the moment, or the now. But to get to now, to this moment, she needs to first look back over the landscape of memory. Lost in memory, the woman faces history, a history that has been told 1,000 times before. If you look on the horizon, here and there, first seen, now hidden, are little sightings of hope, of dreams, of memories. If you look closely through the corridors of time, one could see the batting wings of hope. Hope was the thing missed, the thing hoped for. You could almost taste it, but it was just out of reach, just above your head. I am endlessly curious. Wagner, The Ring, is probably one of my favorite pieces of music, even with his fascist soul. I still love that music. Beckett has meant the world, and I think about him often. And I'm thinking about, I know that there are many different kinds of people that are in this room who come from different places and different spaces. You occupy different territories and zones, imaginations and thinking. Some of you are artists, some of you are collectors, some of you are simply curious. And so I think that what I thought that I could also do today is to really sort of direct my talk in a major way towards those of you who are really deeply interested in the arts and how we make what we make. And one of the reasons that I thought that I would start with some of the people that I love so dear is because there is something called influence, that I'm really interested in the influence that happens with me, that happens with other artists. That there is no way that we do any of this on our own. We are all in relationship. We are all in context. We are always in relationship to others. And the way in which we are in relationship to one another, I think, is absolutely fascinating. How are we influenced by what comes before, whether that influence is to be found in literature, in dance, in the visual, in the narrative, in music, etc. These kinds of books, for instance, Toni Morrison's Song of Solomon or Anna Karenina, I read them on my knees. I remember for the first time reading Anna Karenina and sitting in my bedroom, and I was reading this incredible section about being at the races. And what I remember most profoundly was that after reading this section, I realized actually that I wasn't in 18th, 19th century Russia, but I was actually in my bedroom in Newhall, California. And I was so amazed. I was so amazed that this writer, Tolstoy, had taken me on this journey that I put down the book and applauded. Right? You know, that I was a horse, that I was Anna, that I was a hat, that I was the wind. And I realized, I think, in that moment also then what it means really, what it meant to be a powerful artist, what art has the power to do, that it has the power to transform lives. I'm showing you Alice Walker's In Search of Our Mother's Gardens, and we'll sort of come back to this again later. I think of her in relationship to the kind of work that she made in relationship to Linda Naucklin's work, the sort of question of why there have been no great women artists. Why there have been no great women artists. Her seminal essay that still, of course, is influential today, and we still keep asking ourselves the question, but maybe it's time to sort of re-theorize that and ask, why have no women been considered great artists? Maybe that's the question. And so I see these sort of ideas about the role of women, the role of men, the role of minorities in producing this sort of amazing, inventive thing called the arts, powerful though it is, in the way in which we learn from one another, influence one another, participate with one another, and yet there is still these sort of things around equity that we actually have to address, and one of the powerful ways of dealing with that, of course, is through the arts. And again, I keep coming back to this idea of influence. The relationship between Nina Simone and Frank Sinatra is they sang My Way. I listen to both constantly. This really beautiful sense of influence moving across genre and across time and across space in a very interesting way. And so these artists are artists that I love, that I keep coming back to, and they assist me in grounding myself. You know, the artists that I love and also the artists that I really don't like so much. But I have to sort of figure out why I don't. Why I don't. And I think Eleanor raised this yesterday, this idea of the things that you love, right? You have to love it. Sometimes, you know, we don't always know how to articulate that. Right? We don't know how to articulate what it is about a piece that we find so incredibly compelling and moving to the extent that we have to possess it, live with it, wake up every morning and see it, right? But we know that it's there, sort of like love, right? You know, sort of like love. Most of us wouldn't be able to tell you what it is, just something that we feel, you know? I think this is sort of, you know, the first great fade. I needed to know that beautiful Star of David. And then, of course, you know, David Hammons, who I think is really, you know, anybody that can sell snowballs in the snow has my vote. His essay on influence, all of these artists in one way or another being influenced by one another. Many of us reading, thinking about the same text, using the same text, using the same music, using the same artist that we are really attempting to ingest because what they've made has been so amazing. Felix Gonzalez Torres and Ana Minyata, who I think about often. And so in some way or another, the work that she's made, how she's made that, has deeply influenced me along with a whole host of other men and women. Adrian Piper and that sort of beautiful sense of sort of using the body, the sort of marked body to act out, right? Using herself, that sort of courage of painting herself and then walking down a street and brushing up against people and daring them to touch her, right? So that they would or would not be rubbing shoulders with woman or with blackness. And then people like Eleanor Antin, who decided that she would, for a moment in her performance, become black. Black Like Me, contemporarily. Fabulous piece, Eleanor Anton, the Black Ballerina. Really, really, really brilliant, brilliant work, right? Influenced, out of a whole set of practices that had come before. And then there are people like Cindy Sherman, right? This idea about influence, we are all being influenced. We're pulling from all kinds of references in the historical past and classical painting, Italian painting, French painting, in order to make what we make now. The amazing Duchamp, right? In his work, Lorna Simpson spinning around that. Most people don't think about Lorna Simpson spinning around Duchamp because most people don't think of black artists spinning around anything but blackness, right? Which is kind of unfortunate. And then, somebody, this painting, which has inspired 19,000 other contemporary images, right? A very, very, very important image, even for me. My sort of idea of bringing the black body forward through the use of these little girls. A flower girl comes forward, or somebody like Micheline Thomas, who goes on to do the same. In another way, using, again, classical painting. This, of course, the beginning, the origins of the world, fabulous. Fabulous piece, right? But I didn't know Duchamp had actually thought about that. I didn't know that there was a connection there, or that, Russian constructivism was really based on semaphore. These wonderful ideas about influence, and then my sort of spin on Duchamp, whose spin was on Corbier's. And then, the way I use other kinds of influence, I also make these sort of little paintings, based on novels from the 60s, those whole sort of Mandingo series, which I love. They're really great. The covers are all like completely, lewd and lascivious, but really wonderful. I think a lot about Marguerite. So this essay, again, this sort of idea of influence and where work is coming from, playing on, riffing, using a kind of mediation in order to discuss other ideas about mediation, going back again to Anna Mendieta, right? This idea that she was, using her body to splay it and to use it as a site of meaning and a site of contested meaning, I thought was absolutely important and imperative, and she has been absolutely essential to my way of thinking about the body, my way of thinking about women, my way of thinking about gesture, my way of thinking about what's possible, what I can do, what I can and cannot do, what I'm allowed to do, what I decide that I must necessarily disrupt. And then, I realized, that, yes, there's this thing about influence. It matters to me a great deal. I care a lot about what artists are doing, and that sort of focus about what the artists are doing and how I'm thinking about them has been very important in my work and in my process. When I'm not thinking about other artists, sometimes I make videos. And actually, over the last 10 years or so, I've made many, though I don't show them very often. Occasionally I do, and some of them are interesting to me. Here's a list of a few. Lonnie Lincoln and Me, which is a piece that I made not long ago, which is based on holograms. Will be showing in my gallery really soon at Jack Shaman in New York. Coming Up for Air was one of the first pieces that I made. Italian Dreams I made while I was in Rome, and it was I had this really wonderful residency at the American Academy in Rome. And then when I got to Rome, I thought, wouldn't it be fabulous? I really, I thought that if I'd gone to Rome when I was 16, that I would have just sort of slept my way across Rome, right? But going, as a sort of older woman was really sort of important, that I was older, that I wasn't going to be on the, anybody's Vespa doing anything, I was just going to be going back to my studio and working my behind off. And so, but I really knew at that point that when I went to Rome, and I think maybe I was, in my late 50s or something, I really did have a sense of what I wanted to do there. And one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about was sort of Fellini. Fellini's films have been very important to me. And I looked at many of them, and I used to get up really early in the morning and look at those films long before my husband would get up, because he was just like, okay, Carrie. And so I knew that I wanted to work at Cinecittà, that I wanted to have that experience of working close to Fellini and being in that space, and that it was really important for me to construct the images of the kinds of people that I wanted to see in film. You know, that as much as I love Fellini, I knew that Fellini didn't necessarily love me, that I really wasn't a part of his imagination, you know? And so that I had to make myself in his space. And so I made a piece called Italian Dreams, which was an important piece. Images from Lonnie Lincoln and me, Lincoln, Lonnie, and me, which is this sort of hologram piece, which is really sort of interesting and gave me a wonderful opportunity to play in this beautifully constructed space. It's an entire room that you walk into that you just can't tell exactly what this illusion is that you are seeing, with wonderful music, some of it made by Jason Moran. The work that I do, you know, around this sort of, you know, on the one hand, there's sort of this, again, my own personal work, the video work that I'm doing, that I'm deeply involved in, and then there's all the sort of social work that I'm deeply involved in. And so I started a small organization with a small collective of artists, so I'm sort of primarily the person that runs it. It's called Social Studies 101. And one of the first actions I did was in the 2004, I think, around that time, presidential election, I decided that I would try to sell hopes and dreams in a bottle. And so I did a series of performances in and around New York and in Harlem, selling hopes and dreams in a bottle. And then at a certain point, you know, we did things also with the city of Edenville, Florida. And I started thinking a lot about what was going on at a certain point with black-on-black crime and violence. A lot of shooting had been going on in my neighborhood, and so through social studies, I started this sort of, my own sort of personal campaign in my neighborhood, inviting people to join me, and some people would simply come out of their homes to join me to put up these signs, and we used matchbook covers to put things in bodegas, made a series of billboards that appeared through a certain corridor around the city, which was absolutely wonderful. Just sort of using all of these sort of forms in order to have a conversation with the community in which I lived around the notions of crime and violence. And so I did a series of billboards, a series of matchbook covers, a series of lawn signs, and all this work. And then at a certain point, I decided that, okay, after I'd worked on that for a while, I decided that maybe the next thing that I should really start thinking about doing is how do you engage some of these young people in another kind of process, another kind of life. And so I started a small institute, and it's called the Institute of Sound and Style. We created a safe zone also. This is a very deep project. It's a lot to talk about today because I've been involved in it for a while. But I realized that, that one of the things that, kids are really sort of most interested in, is sex and fashion and music, pretty much like everybody else. And so I started, the Institute of Sound and Style, and I invited, went out and found a group of young people to join me, and I started a summer program. And one of the important things about our summer program was that a program that paid the children to participate. And so we started thinking about this idea of vocational training, that these are kids coming from very, very torn, disruptive families, broken communities. There's no way that they could simply have fun over the summer, right, and learn photography. They really needed a skill, and they also needed to be paid. And so I started this 4 years ago, and I simply continue to work on it. The Institute of Sound and Style, we are still running. We will be moving again into the into the future. The kids are between the ages of 18 and 24, the most vulnerable group, the ones that gangs prey on absolutely the most, and the ones who are most troubled. And so I've decided that it's that group that I'm really most interested at this point in concentrating on and giving my energy and my effort to, bringing them into my studio, not unlike the way Tim Rollins brought young people into his studio to begin to reimagine the role of art in their lives. So these kids are not going to be rappers for the most part, but they can learn what sound engineering is like, and they can learn graphic design, and they can learn videography, and they can learn audio and engineering. And so I've partnered with all of these people in order to do those kinds of skills, and I'm really happy to be bringing some of those kids forward in the next year, where at the end of it, hopefully they'll have a certificate and some jobs where they can actually go and test their skills. So I'm collecting funds, I'm letting that be known, and it's a very important project. And so, so I do all this kind of work. And then, people call me about other kinds of projects too. MoMA called me about doing something for their garden based on another garden that I had been involved in at the University of Massachusetts, where I proposed, when they asked me what I wanted to do around W.E.B. Du Bois, I thought, I think I'm going to name a flower for him. And so it's the Peony of Hope, and it's actually available. You can actually go to White Flower Farms, I think, and Hollingsworth Farms, and you can order my Peony of Hope for your garden. And I do hope that some of you will do that. And then, and so these ideas, so these ideas sort of move into another kind of idea. Right? This idea about sort of gardens and garden spaces, that was one way of sort of really thinking about the way in which you bring people closer to really complicated ideas. People love gardens, right? While you might not want paintings of flowers, usually you do want flowers in your garden. So how to think about that. And then MoMA invited me to do something in their garden. And because, they're doing a new book on their upcoming garden, this beautiful garden, of course, that they've had for many years. They're redoing it, and they're doing a book on the garden and on the history of the garden. And they invited 10 artists or so to do photographs of the garden. And I was one of the last people that they asked to do the project. And it was, it was really sort of wonderful, and I've been doing reenactments already. I'd already been doing reenactments, and so I started thinking that I would do a series of reenactments in MoMA's garden, that I would invite a group of people that certainly would not have been there in 1960 or 1962. And so I was, speaking to Quentin, and, it's like, Quentin, I don't know how, he says, Carrie, you must do this project. And I said, but, well, what kind of budget do I have? I want to invite a bunch of people. What kind of budget do I? He says, Carrie, this budget is not so important. You must simply tell us what you want to do. So I said, well, is it 50,000 or 100,000? Or, Carrie, I cannot talk to you about such things. Or no. But you must give us a proposal. So I gave him a proposal for like $250,000. He said, Carrie, we do not have this money. And so, so I sort of looked at, I went through the archives as I normally do, and sort of pulled out the archive, and then based a series of photographs on these archives. And I took over the garden for about a week and invited all these people to participate in a series of enactments that we did in the garden. So they had yoga in the garden. So I brought in a group of yogis to work in the. It was absolutely beautiful, Carl Hancock Rux and Faria in that photograph, mimicking this other very early piece. This important nude. What's her name? That had taken place in the garden, and inviting people in. Of course, we had to have a special permission to do this nude in the garden, which was hilarious, right? So, you know, but I made I don't know, I made a bunch of photographs, a lot of photographs for it. Maybe they're going to publish maybe 10 of them. I probably sent them maybe 60 photographs for them to choose from. But it was a really wonderful looking at a very particular kind of space, and I had a really great time. And it was a wonderful way of inviting in a group of people to really think about what MoMA is contemporarily and to think about what that space is contemporarily. These things that I have worked on cloth, of course. Many different pieces on cloth, maybe 3 of them, Ritual and Revolution, the Hampton Project, and Ritual and Revolution, the Jefferson Suites. This, of course, was a book that was produced by Aperture with the installation, the first installation being, I think, at Williams College, who originally commissioned the piece. So that was really sort of wonderful. Deeply involved in science, and so I've done pieces around the genome. It's always sort of amazing to me, you know, you look out at the universe, you can either look out at the universe or you can look at, you know, at your cells, and essentially they look exactly the same, you know, either through a microscope or through a telescope, it's all the same. This sort of way that we are life, what life is, and how it sort of mysteriously operates. I now feel like I'm nothing more than just a piece of dust in the wind. That's it. It's nothing more than that. And yet we have this incredible thing that we call life. And we're here for a flash, for it seemed to me that making pieces, you know, sometimes I think that I need to sort of somehow get beyond myself. Get beyond myself, get beyond this anxiety. I think about this moment that we are contemporarily in. I think, my God, it's certainly nothing like it was in the 60s. And that, in part, how we come to be where we are, how we stand as we are, what we think about who we are, how we've been formulated as a nation, is absolutely based on the 60s in a very profound way, and the assassinations that happened in the 60s. The assassinations that happened in the 60s. The assassinations that happened in the 60s. Where we lost great, great, great men. The assassination of Martin, Medgar, Malcolm. The shooting, the killing of students at Kent State. That I thought it might be really important for me, for students that I was working with, to look at how we come to be as we are. The assassination of Martin and Medgar, of course. The assassination of the Kennedys, both. Both. Robert Kennedy, of course, knew that he was going to be assassinated, right? And that moment before, immediately following the assassination of his brother, he was so completely convinced that Hoover was responsible that he called him and said, "What did you do in the role of my brother's death? I know that you're responsible." That's where we came from. That's, I think, important. And that to the extent that we don't acknowledge and deal with that is to the extent that we can't deal with the now, right? That very much of where we are is still predicated on this past, that the past has a very deep grip on the future and on the now. And so this was a really important project for me to spin around the construction of history, which is also film, a 30-minute film, and has been very, very important to my thinking. This sort of reimagining, this reconstruction of history that I'm deeply involved in one way or another. But the other thing that I really love to do, because as you can tell, I cannot stop talking, you know, is to bring people together, I think, in really interesting ways. And so when I was given this sort of an incredible opportunity at the Guggenheim, not only was I the first woman, I was really the first African-American to be given a solo exhibition at the Guggenheim, which is pretty extraordinary for 2014. It's like, what? You gotta be kidding. So I thought, well, what can we do? We should have like an amazing time. We should invite extraordinary artists into the Guggenheim, and I should take that over too for like a week or so, and have like an interesting set of dialogues and experiences. And so I invited, through my process, Carrie Mae Live, past tense, future perfect. I sort of love this sort of play on language, and I invited 180 artists to gather with me to sort of talk. Artists, writers, dancers, poets, concerts, musicians, singers. It was really quite a knockout. And we had an amazing time over the course of several days. I invited lots and lots of people, architects and so forth. So there were a lot of people in the room, junior artists, mid-career artists, senior artists, all these sort of different people from different walks of life in proximity to one another, sort of giving up and sharing their ideas about who they are, what they're doing, what they're working on, and why they're working on it, and why it may or may not be important for us to know about. And then I did a series of concerts at the same time, inviting a group of people to sort of join me there. Then, of course, I did a project for the Ford Foundation, inviting another whole group of artists to join me there over a series of days as well. In this context, asking a group of artists who were senior artists to come work with me at the Ford Foundation, but they had to bring with them two younger artists who were really interested in the ideas of art and social engagement. And then I work, with artists doing things like, album covers and videos for artists like the amazing Jerry Allen. And the first time I started, I realized that, not only am I interested in what I do, I'm deeply interested in what other artists are doing, and I'm deeply interested in music. And so one of the first things that I did just as I was leaving college was to organize a really fabulous concert with the World Saxophone Quartet and the Persuasions. And I still organize concerts. So I organize concerts. I organize convenings with other artists. I'm working with Jason Moran, and I'm working with the Theastrigates and VJ Iyer and David Murray. And then out of these sort of projects, so Yale called me and they said, well, we'd love to do a book with you. And I thought, well, that's really lovely, but I want to do a book actually with another group of people, which I think could be more interesting, and that sort of pulls together the way in which artists have been working around art and social engagement. And so as opposed to doing a single book around my work, I thought it would be so interesting to pull together a group of artists that I admire. And so I invited Theastrigates, Mark Bradford, Suzanne Lacey, Amalia Mesa Baines, Jeff Chang, Rick Lowe, etc., to do what I call a case study. And so there are these various volumes. Each artist will be given a volume, and the volumes will go together so that they are in a case, making them all sort of relational, so that this social work is relational. Who are some of the most interesting artists working around the country, doing some of the most critical work imaginable? So Yale was very kind, and they said, we'll do it. We'll do it. And so I think of it as being sort of really unique, because this is just simply my simple mock-up that I made in my studio to give Yale just an idea of where I was going, what I was thinking about with the original idea. But I absolutely love it, and I'm really thrilled that they have decided to do it, and it's going to come out next year. So that is, like the other kind of work that, that I'm involved in. It's sort of, yes, I'm enjoying the kind of work that I make. It's really important to me, that we just had Kitchen Table published after many, many years. I'm really happy that I was working with the amazing designer, Takaki, who brought this piece together who designed it for me. It designed it beautifully. Unfortunately, it's here. I think we're going to sign a few copies this afternoon. A very, very important work of looking at and understanding how one might look at the female body, and then, of course, how I might look at self in relationship to these sort of broader ideas, of specific ideas of femininity and of the female and the role of women in position to the family, to men, to herself, to her child, to children, etc. A very important work to be done, and thank you for your comments. You know, it's been very interesting. It's been an interesting project because it's the kind of project that you do because you have to. You make it because you have to make it. I made it because I absolutely had to make it, and I worked on it every single day for just months and months and months and months and months. I had to make it, and then you realize that there are women across the globe who have in one way or another been touched and moved by this work, and not just women, but certainly women have been. It's been very important to learn that. It's not I don't think I've ever been to a talk where women didn't approach me or somebody didn't approach me to talk to me about the influence of this work. And to that extent, I mean, one of the things that I think a lot about, not just simply in relationship to myself, but in relationship to practitioners, to artists, you know, are the levels of invention. What are the levels of invention that go on within the work that we make? What are the levels of invention that allow for a new discourse to arise, right? And a new practice to be actually practiced. What do you make, right? You know, so that we can talk about the great modernists. We talked earlier about their influence. Their influence was so great that now we have a whole new body of work that it's based on that, right? Based on that historic past. These ideas about women, I look at them carefully. Standing on shaky ground, I posed myself for a critical study, but I was no longer certain of the questions to be asked. It was clear I was not Monet's type, and Picasso, who had a way with women, only used me, and Duchamp never even considered me. But it could have been worse. Imagine my fate had de Kooning gotten hold of it. And it sort of goes on from there. You know, these ideas about painting, these ideas about other artists and how I'm thinking about other artists have been important. When Robert Colescott represented the United States at the Venice Biennale, he asked me to make his portrait, and I knew that he wasn't talking about a headshot. Seduced by one another, yet bound by certain social conventions. You framed me and I framed you, but we were both framed by modernism. And even though we knew better, we continue that time-honored tradition of the artist in his model. His ideas about how one is complicit in their own victimization. From here I saw what happened and I cried. Maybe we'll talk about this later because it was a very contested piece of work, important, commissioned by the Getty. You became a scientific profile, a Negroid type, an anthropological debate, and a photographic subject. You became mama, mammy, mother, and then, yes, confidant, haha. Descending the throne, you became foot soldier and cook. You became house, yard, field, and kitchen. You became Uncle Tom, John, and Clemens, Jim. Drivers, writers, and men of letters. You became a whisper and a symbol. For your names, you took hope and humble. You became black and tanned, and your whipwind of change howled low, blowing itself smack in the middle of Ellington's orchestra. Born with a veil, you became root worker, juju mama, voodoo queen, hoodoo doctor. Some said you were the spitting image of evil. You became playmate to the patriarch and its daughter. You became an accomplice. And the music for God Bless the Child. And so it was this sort of piece that, you know, I could collapse all of these different kinds of histories. A complicated history about the history of photography, the history of America, and the history of race in American photography. I mean, it was really sort of, it was this sort of way of collapsing, you know, several different histories on top of one another, and it was really fascinating to work on. You became the Joker's joke and anything but what you were. Some laughed hard and loud. And some said, the only thing a nigga can do for me is to shine my shoes. And you became boots and spades and coons, all those stereotypes. And restless after the longest winter, you marched and marched and marched. And in your sing-song prayer, you asked, well, did my Lord deliver Daniel? And there were, of course, many, many issues that came up around that piece and how it worked, how it functioned, ideas about copyright, and it was very complicated, but very, very, very important. I'm just going to sort of rush through these sort of last pieces with you. I don't want to keep you very long. It's too long this afternoon. You know, at a certain point, I realized that, architecture was really, really important to me. And the only way that I really came to understand that was through my photographs. My photographs began to tell me how important architecture was to me, you know, and what architecture is and what it does and how it speaks to us across huge distances and enormous cultures, right? That I didn't realize that I was looking at a woman's body until later. Fabulous, right? This idea that, that architecture inscribes its sexuality, right? We know who the space is meant for, right? It's inscribed in the architecture. And Western architecture operates in very similar ways, except we don't talk about it in that way, right? And so I've been thinking about architecture for a really long time. And when I went to Rome, not only to work at Cinecittà on Italian Dreams, this wonderful little film that I made while I was there, I also began to stand in front of architecture, great buildings, and trying to understand the role of the individual, how they were made to feel in relationship to a place, to a country, to a state. And so I had done this kind of work in Louisiana, I had done this kind of work in Cuba, and then finally I was doing this kind of work around the 13 gates of Rome, one of the most important cities, I think, in the world for all kinds of reasons. And so I simply started working my way across the city, through the city, around the city, up and over the city. Every morning I would get up at about 4:30, 5 o'clock, and I would hit it. I would be in the streets for hours every day, looking at this city, moving through it and trying to understand the role of architecture. And the thing that, is really sort of fascinating about your work is that your work really tells you, again, what you're interested in, And if you pay attention to what your work is telling you, if you get out of the way of the work will indeed speak to you. And so moving through Rome, I understood, of course, at a certain moment that I really needed to visit also Mussolini's Rome and fascist Rome. That Rome isn't simply, just this sort of relic, of, sort of ancient beauty. It's also a place of real terror, right? That's a part of its architecture, and that's a part of its history, and that it was really important to me to sort of negotiate that as well. And again, there were many, 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 many photographs that were made in this city and in this way, and in Rome. And then, as I was saying, just as I'm trying to get out of the way of my work, the last photograph I made on the last day that I was in Rome photographing, I photographed these museums. And I thought, oh, museums. And so I jumped on a bunch of planes over the course of like a few days, and I made lots and lots of photographs standing in front of museums, the architecture of museums, and thinking about the role of museums, what they are, what they do, how we use them, how they will be used now, and how they will be used in the future. These institutions are changing, slowly but surely. And so I thought it might be important to use my skin, to use my body, standing before them and imagining my muse. She's my muse. And so she's led me into very interesting places. This sort of standing in front of, using the body as a surface of reflection that also leads you into and past and into the space. So monuments in the Washington, D.C. area. This is Echoes of Marion. And Echoes of Marion, in some small way, was also linked to this idea of slow fade to black. These sort of voices that I was starting to lose, that I wasn't hearing so often anymore, that I wasn't hearing their names, I wasn't hearing their music, even though they had been great, great, great singers and sort of laid down the gauntlet in terms of who we are, as Americans, and why we listen, how we listen, what we listen to. Great, 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 great inspirations from, Sarah Vaughan to Abby Lincoln, and on and on and on and on and on. Those ideas of what's heard, what's heard and how it's heard through a set of devices. From string theory to color theory, playing around with notions of color, moving beyond the binary of simply black and white. She's like my little princess. Color, real and imagined. Again, this sort of teasing out, playing with these sort of notions of color, one thing leading to the next, laying down its palette, what exists behind bands of color. Blue notes. And only back to the constructing history, because then at a certain moment I thought that it might be very important I was starting to really think about grace and democracy, and starting to write about it, and to really consider it. And then I received a phone call from the director of Spoleto, they were interested in what I was working on, and I was just beginning to work on a gift box for President Obama. I don't know where many of you are in terms of your politics, but nonetheless, I was working on a gift box for President Obama, and I wanted to include in it all of these sort of things from various artists, and music, and poetry, and bits and pieces of art, and you know, I would make this beautiful box, and I would just cram it, just stuff it full, and then I would just send it, you know, to the Presidential Library, because I wanted to say thank you. I wanted to say thank you for your service to the nation. Thank you, because I know that it's been hard. I know it's been tough. And so I was working, you know, so this thing that, you know, that started as, you know, so I got up, you know, I got up very early one morning, you know, because I dreamt about the idea, and I was talking to my kids in my dream. I was talking to my little young kids at ISS about how to make something real and tangible. And so I sort of rolled out of bed at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I rolled over to my computer, and I opened it up, and I wrote like 25 artists that morning, asking them if they would make a contribution to my Obama gift box. By the end of the day, most of them had written back saying, absolutely yes, we would love to. And then shortly thereafter, I realized that I actually had a piece that could also live as a performance. And so I started writing this piece that I thought I was going to give to Obama, or that I will give to Obama, called The Role of Grace in the Pursuit of Democracy, the role of grace in the pursuit of democracy. And so we then, you know, started working on this performance. This performance actually just happened just recently, and it's going to, it happened at Spoleto. It was really wonderful. I brought together a whole group of interesting composers, interesting singers, wonderful dancer. I had no idea that I was going to be in it, but I am. It was, you know, it's a really beautiful piece, and now, amazingly, it's going to Yale University Theater, where it's going to be opening in September. So I'm really excited about it. It's really elegant. It's really beautiful. Some of it's messy, and you know, you have to I have to cut half of it out. But you know, but they're wonderful. They're pieces of it that are like little jewels, really sort of beautiful little things that are happening with it that I'm actually very excited by. So I spent time for the last year. I've been working on the text, working on the video, working on the songs, working on the design, working on the dimensions, working on the set. You know, I mean, it's just been this completely immersive, fabulous, wonderful experience. Alicia Moran sings Amazing Grace in this piece. And somebody wrote me recently saying, I will never, ever in my life forget that performance, ever. I mean, and she's like just a brilliant performer, as is Issa Davis and Carl Hancock Rux, and the young Aja Monet, who joins us, and Francesca Harper. And then, of course, we involved a group of local steppers, African-American steppers in the area of Charleston, who came to perform with us and absolutely knocked it out of the park. And so it's been a really interesting work, important work. And the questions that I've raised here have to do with what is democracy, and what is equity, and what is grace. What does that mean? And how do we articulate those things? How do we articulate it through who we are and how we live our lives? I ask the questions, you know, what are the risks? What are the rewards? And how do you measure a life? How do you measure a life? And so I wanted to just end with just a short piece that I made for our performance. It's a short video that I'm going to play, and I'm going to read a short text to it. Can we start, Sean? What is this thing called grace? And how do we measure a life? Do we measure it in inches, yards, feet? How? As I move through this extraordinary place, Aspen, I realize that there is incredible capacity to change, to embrace change, to figure out new modes of being, to create new landscapes and new vistas. And all the houses that I've been in have shown me that. Beautiful vistas, shaped by your own hands. While we can, live. While we can, let's consider the nature of what is and what will be. Consider the ebb and the flow of tides, the bliss of water lapping at the shore, and the wonders of the world while we can. While we can, let's stand for something, not fall for anything. While we can, let's consider the slope of a woman's body when it's given in joy and without force. Consider the lonely days and the long nights, the empty yearning of the lonely and the shallow flow of the deep, that deep despair of young men dying much, much, much too soon. While we can, let's consider the meaning of meaning. Consider beauty and all of its bounty. And consider the lack of consideration, the meanness of broken spirits. While we can, perhaps we could consider fixing what is broken and lost and damaged. While we can. While we can, consider saving ourselves in some small portion of the world around us. Thank you. Well, thank you. Hey. Hi. Oh, that's very kind. Thank you. Somebody must have orchestrated that. So I understand that maybe we'll take just a couple of questions. It's a couple of questions, maybe two, or, or even a comment, and then then I can leave. That's okay. Yes, John.
It wasn't a talk, Carrie. That was a performance.
All right, thank you. So I think that they want to have the microphone, so if you raise your hand, if you have questions. If you don't, that's completely fine. I absolutely understand. Thank you for coming today. Thank you again to the Anderson Ranch for this amazing welcome to my dear friends, Fred Tomaselli, who is here in the audience. I'm so happy that you're here. Ian Barry, who's here in the audience. I'm so happy that you're here. Tamla Franks from the Yale Museum of Art, thank you so much for coming. And thank you for gracing me with your presence. And to my love, Jeffrey Joseph Aloysius Hoon, thanks for giving me the courage to be. So we go.